Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to read thick tomes. Now, first things first, when I read like a thick tome right off the bat, I don't tend to annotate, I don't tend to mark anything up. If I do anything, I will just gently mark things I find interesting. So if I reread it, which I likely will do in the future, I have those places marked. For example, pull out this guy. For example, I read Elantris earlier this year, and you can see I've tagged a few things. They're all one color because I just found a particular passage or a particular scene or thing that was happening interesting or fun or thought-provoking, but I didn't want to waste any time annotating it or taking notes on it, so I just kind of tagged it, and that works for me. I'm just gonna keep that down there. So I thought that I would share how I read like long tomes over a long period of time in hopes that it could help some people. So first things first, you need obviously the book. You need some sort of tags, or like you need some sort of tabs, or even just like a note, sticky notes that you can cut or rip into pieces, however you want. It's fine. I also use a sticky notepad. I use some sort of journal or notebook, and obviously a pen. So the first step is to obviously like tab out your reading schedule. So you have to figure out how long you're going to be reading this book for, what the period of time you want per tag. Is it weekly? Is it daily? Is it bi-weekly? And then you want to tab out your book. So for examples, I'll show you A Ship of Magic by Hobb. I only tabbed out to every 200 pages because I was trying to read this in a month, and I knew that I would need to read about 200 pages every week if I wanted to read this in a month. This additional yellow tab right here, which I think it's not going to show you, that was just for my own guidance as I read, to tab out the first 100 pages. I don't know why, I really like to know where my 100 pages are at. It gives me a really easy goal, not easy goal, but it gives me a very visual goal to shoot for. And I like having, I pretty much mark out any book that I'm reading because it's easy for me. Now, The Way of Kings by Sanderson is very different. I decided to read The Way of Kings over a 2-month period. For this book, I basically tabbed out each section per week of the 2 months. And so I went through and tabbed out each weekly goal. So I even tabbed out the dates on this one, so I would know exactly when I was reading, like, okay, I need to read this one by the 29th, I have to read this one by the 19th. And that was incredibly helpful because I didn't have to keep up with remembering where I was at. If I forgot to read a week, I wouldn't get behind. I would still be able to look down and say, oh, okay, I still have to read this many pages now by the end of this week if I want to get back on track. So that's the first things first. Obviously, you know your reading schedule, you know how much time you have to take, and you also know how much you can read a week. Perhaps instead of doing it by time, you're doing it per page number, and you're saying, I want to try to read 50 pages a week. That's totally fine too. You just got to do what works for you. So then I have a notebook. Just a notebook. It's any old notebook that you have. Now what I do is I'm trying to keep this back so you don't accidentally get spoiled for anything. So what I do is, as I'm reading after a chapter or two, I'll just jot down anything that's interesting or seems important, or that it might come back into play. Any major decisions a character makes, I will write it down in here. Sometimes there's more information than others. It's just kind of feeling it out as I go. For example, this page, this is the entire prelude, prologue, part 1, and interludes for The Way of Kings. Everything that I wrote about it is on this one page. That way I have like a really quick, easy thing right there to, one, read up if I come back to it. I can go, okay, don't quite remember what just happened. Let me read a couple of bullet points and just kind of remind myself what's been happening. Some people might not find that helpful, some people will. It's totally up to you. I like both because the physical act of writing something down helps me remember it. And then the final step that I do is I will then make a post-it note. And so these post-it notes vary from book to book. So this is basically everything that happened in part 1 that I thought was important enough to mark down. So when I started part 2 or when I come back to it, I can just read this post-it note and be like, oh yeah, I remember all that stuff, that's fine. And then I made one for part 2, and then I will make one for part 3 as I go. In Ship of Magic, I put a post-it note in here because my thought was I would just jot down anything important that happens every 100 pages or so, and if I needed it, then I would have it. So the general idea of the post-it note is just to have a really, it sort of challenges you to only jot down the important things or the plot or character changing moments, so you're not spending hours and hours writing down notes. And then obviously it's really small. Look at this, it's a tiny little guy. And it allows for a really quick, easy way to just quickly glance and see and kind of like refresh yourself on what's been happening. So I thought I would do this little video because I was one of the people that was really intimidated by reading really thick books, and especially over long periods of time, where it becomes really tricky and there's a lot that's going on and there's a lot of moving pieces and different characters, and it sometimes is really difficult to keep track of them all. And so this system has been working pretty well for me. And the best thing is you can then take these post-it notes out and stick them in the next book if you want. Or at the end of the book, you can read through your post-it notes and make one post-it note for this book, which is probably what I'm going to do for The Way of Kings, is likely just make one post-it note of The Way of the King's main plot points. So then and stick that to the front of Words of Radiance when I start that book. So yeah, I hope that was helpful for some people. Feel free to share in the comments how you read, if you found any systems that work really well for you, if there's anything you tried that was a hard pass, which was a hard no for you, feel free to let me know as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.